Last thing to get down, okay? Hag-Seed novel, prose fiction novel, it's the telling mode. The reason there's that weird term, that might seem silly, like the telling mode, it's just a technical term to distinguish from the performance mode in case you get asked about that. And obviously that's important, that one is telling, it provides more context. It allows Atwood to humanize Felix because she's able to elaborate. She's not confined to that dialogic form. Comic fiction, there is still elements of humor in it. And I think a lot of that is through the kind of quirks of Felix's personality, if you all remember. Like, it often makes fun of Felix through the narration. So there are elements of humor to preserve the comedic elements of the play. Third person limited narration. What about stream of consciousness style? What does that mean? So stream of consciousness is basically where someone's thoughts are put straight onto the page. So they don't often follow a very consistent structure. So imagine if my thoughts are all over the place, that is going to be reflected through the write-in. And that's what happens. So third person limited narration, because that is basically showing us Felix's mind, that is going to work alongside stream of consciousness, where as we see Felix's mind work and unravel, we're going to see all of these very short sentences, long sentences, rhetorical questions. Does this sound familiar from the text? Like, there are a lot of short and sharp sentences, that's short syntax, truncated syntax where the sentences are chopped up. All of that is allowing for a more authentic mode of delivery. So you should all note, next to stream of consciousness style, it creates a more authentic mode of representation. It humanizes, again, it humanizes, that key word. What's a prolepsis? Chapter 34. How does Hag-Seed begin? Even though a large part of the narrative is linear, right? There is a non-linearity. So you can all mention that there is a non-linearity to it, in that the beginning of the novel actually starts with the performance of the Tempest itself, which happens in chapter 34. So a prolepsis is a preview. A prolepsis is a preview of a chapter that's going to happen later in the novel. So why does Atwood put that early? Because she wants to mimic what aspect of form in the Tempest. See, so if you talk about the prolepsis, or you talk about in medias res, you can actually then say, emulated by the prolepsis of chapter 34 in Hag-Seed. It's just that extra clause now where you make that direct link. Can everyone see that? So you should link those two things. Again, the flashbacks, right, is basically trying to provide more context than the play does to create a more human story of grief. But it's referred to in the past tense because we want to move into present tense. We want to do it through a flashback because it's past tense, but actually the novel's written in present tense. It just switches to past tense, or it begins with past tense during the flashbacks to kind of catch us up. But then it actually begins again almost later in the novel in present tense. Okay, so it's written in present tense as it's happening live, because what's it trying to preserve? So the flashbacks and the switch from past tense to present tense is actually Atwood's clever way of preserving the unity of time, place, and action. Does everyone see that? So all of the previous context she's going to do through flashbacks, which is kind of like when Prospero was telling the story. Do you all see that? He's telling the story to Miranda about his past. Well, we get it through these flashbacks in past tense, but then majority of the novel's in present tense, which feels like it's almost happening in real time. It doesn't quite work out that way, but it's trying to at least be inspired by it. It's just trying to play upon that. Metatextuality, obviously the play itself happens within the novel, and that happens right at the start with the prolepsis, because the first thing that happens in the novel is the performance of the play itself. So there's a metatextual opening to the novel, because it's actually the play of the Tempest itself that begins the novel. The performance of the play itself begins the novel. So obviously you can link, now what I do on my notes if you've written these down, is I would link metatextuality with the prolepsis, because maybe that's a point you want to merge. Obviously, intertextuality, there are direct structural parallels between the texts, and also there are explicit intertextual references to the Tempest. Felix acknowledges how he's very much like the Duke, right? Prospero. Realism, think about it. Felix is actually mainly going to carry out his revenge in a literal prison setting. Obviously, Atwood's playing upon the figurative prison setting of the island. So you can connect that to magic realism. See, magic realism and realism there. There's a link.